You know that one history class where everything felt sanitized? Yeah, this isn't that. It's welcome to new discoveries that are rewriting American history, where we about to drop some truth bombs that make your textbooks cry, because we're diving deep into the murky waters of America's past. And let me tell you, it's about to get weird. Buckle up, history buffs and conspiracy theorists alike. First up, hidden agendas behind U.S. expansion. Remember Manifest Destiny? That whole God wants us to take over the continent thing? Well, turns out it wasn't just about bringing freedom and democracy to the wild frontier. Shocking, I know. Textbooks paint it as a visionary move for national growth. But here's the kicker. Jefferson was also knee-deep in land speculation out west. Talk about a conflict of interest that would make modern politicians blush, and politicians with dollar signs in their eyes. Recent studies have uncovered a web of economic interests driving westward expansion. It wasn't just pioneers and covered wagons. It was railroad tycoons, land speculators. Picture this. It's 1803, and Thomas Jefferson's just scored the Louisiana Purchase. Yes, slavery was the central issue, but this conflict was messier than a toddler eating spaghetti. It's almost like people are complicated. And let's not forget the California Gold Rush. Sure, it brought thousands of fortune seekers west, trying to gain recognition and support. Meanwhile, the Union was playing its own diplomatic game to keep foreign powers out of the conflict. But it also led to the systematic displacement and genocide of Native American tribes. That's a far cry from the romanticized land of opportunity narrative we've been fed. Speaking of narratives that need a serious reality check, let's talk about the Civil War. For instance, did you know that some Union states actually allowed slavery during the war? Looking at you, Kentucky? The reality? Indigenous peoples were fighting back with everything they had, and sometimes winning. The actual complexity of the Civil War, that's right, a full-on successful rebellion that most of us never learned about. If you think the Civil War was just about slavery, hold on to your stovepipe hats. This pan-Indian alliance came dangerously close to halting American expansion in the Old Northwest. If it weren't for some seriously bad luck, U.S. history might look very different today. There's more, where the U.S. government spent millions trying to develop psychic spies. But you read that right. Those founding fathers we've put on pedestals. They were just as flawed and contradictory as the rest of us. Turns out, the colonists were actually paying way less in taxes than their British counterparts. The real issue? They wanted a say in how those taxes were spent. It was more no taxation without negotiation. They wanted to use ESP to gather intelligence. If anything, it makes it richer, more human, and way more relevant to the messy world we live in today. Keep digging, keep questioning, and never stop being curious about the past. Hit like if school failed you, because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of how weird and wild American history really is. And in the comments, tell me which fact messed with your brain the most. Was it the secret Cold War experiments? The complexity of the Civil War? Or maybe Jefferson's real estate side hustle? Because understanding where we've really been is the key to figuring out where we're going. The results were, because the more we know about our past, the better we can shape our future. Inconclusive. Signing off from the twisted world of real American history. This is Legacy of Emprise. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next video. But hey, points for creativity. What have we learned? History isn't as simple, it's a tangled mess of competing interests, hidden agendas, and human complexity. And sometimes, the stories we tell ourselves about our past say more about us than they do about what actually happened. Right. Operation Midnight Climax? Yes, that was its real name. Involved the CIA. History isn't written in stone. It's written by people. And sometimes, those people had motives. Whether it's glossing over uncomfortable truths, exaggerating achievements, or straight up rewriting events, the history we learn is always filtered through someone's lens. Setting up brothels in San Francisco to dose unsuspecting Johns with LSD and watch what happened. All in the name of national security, of course. These conflicts lasted decades and cost the U.S. government millions. The Seminoles, joined by escaped slaves, used guerrilla tactics that would make modern special forces jealous. Except these aren't conspiracy theories. They're declassified government projects that'll make your skin crawl. The war wasn't just fought on American soil. Confederate agents were busy in Europe. Recent scholarship has revealed that motivations on both sides were far more nuanced than North good, South bad. And here's a mindbender. Not all Southerners supported secession. In fact, entire regions like East Tennessee and Western North Carolina were hotbeds of Union sympathy. But wait, there's more. Champion of liberty and owner of over 600 slaves. Recent DNA evidence has confirmed his relationship with Sally Hemings, throwing a wrench into the whole all men are created equal thing. This policy aged like milk in July, but at the time, both sides thought foreign intervention could tip the scales. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The CIA's mind control program wasn't just real. It was way more extensive than anyone imagined. We're talking unwitting human subjects, LSD experiments, and attempts at psychological manipulation that would make George Orwell say, "Whoa, that's a bit much." Now, let's talk about something your history teacher definitely glossed over. What textbooks left out about indigenous resistance? Forget what you've heard about passive Native Americans just fading into the background of Manifest Destiny. Take the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. Over 17,000 Pueblo warriors rose up against Spanish colonizers, driving them out of New Mexico for 12 years. Or how about the Seminole Wars in Florida? Let's not forget Tecumseh's Confederacy in the early 1800s. Speaking of things that sound too wild to be true, secret Cold War experiments that sound like sci-fi, all right? Tinfoil hat time. Ever heard of MK Ultra? But wait, and let's not forget Project Stargate. Brilliant inventor, savvy diplomat, and total ladies' man. His exploits in France would make a modern tabloid blush. It's not exactly the stuffy, wiggering statesman we picture. Now, let's circle back to where it all began. The founding mythologies, we all just kind of accepted time to burst some bubbles. Take Thomas Jefferson, or how about Benjamin Franklin? And let's talk about that whole taxation without representation thing. So remember, but here's the thing. Uncovering these hidden stories, these forgotten voices, and these complex realities doesn't make our history less interesting. So, the next time someone tries to feed you a simplistic version of history, remember, there's always more to the story.
Sanitized.
Textbooks paint it as a visionary move for national growth. But here's the kicker. Jefferson was knee-deep in debt and desperately needed to boost land values. Talk about a conflict of interest. Yeah, this isn't that. Well, yes, but also, it's complicated. Recent scholarship has revealed a tangled web of economic, social, and political factors that make this conflict way messier than your textbook let on. Yeah, about that. It's only applied to Confederate states. Union slave states gotta keep right on slavin'. Let's talk about a loophole big enough to drive a plantation through. Buckle up, because we're about to make your brain hurt. Don't worry, your textbook probably didn't mention them either. Because nothing says America quite like secret government experiments that sound like they straight out of a sci-fi novel. Let's talk about what your history teacher conveniently forgot to mention about the Civil War. Welcome to new discoveries that are rewriting American history, where we about to drop some truth bombs that make your textbooks cry. Land speculators and politicians with dollar signs in their eyes. Now it's your turn, because we're diving deep into the murky waters of America's past. Let me tell you, it's about to get weird. Not only did he never chop down that cherry tree, but the whole story was invented by a biographer after his death. Talk about fake news, 18th century style. Benjamin Franklin and his kite. William Dawes and Samuel Prescott were also spreading the word that night. It's how we get closer to understanding our real, complex, sometimes ugly, but always fascinating history. Was it the secret psychic spies? The Founding Fathers' fake news? Or maybe you're still processing the idea that the Civil War was as black and white as we thought, at a rewriting American history, where we about to drop some truth bombs that make your textbooks cry. But listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. William Dawes and Samuel Prescott just doesn't have the same ring to it, because let's face it, there's a lot more where this came from. Turns out their famous expedition was basically a giant real estate scouting mission. They weren't just mapping rivers and mountains. They were scoping out prime locations for future land grabs. It's like if NASA's next Mars mission was secretly sponsored by Elon Musk's interplanetary timeshare company, the Civil War. We've beaten that dead horse into glue, but hear me out, because this isn't your great-grandpappy's Civil War story. What else do you think they left out? If I told you that everything you thought you knew about indigenous resistance was, well, let's just say incomplete. Well, hold on to your powdered wigs, because we're just getting started. New archaeological evidence is rewriting the script on pre-Columbian America. It's more Game of Thrones than Dances with Wolves. Remember how we were taught that Native Americans were all nomadic hunter-gatherers? Yeah, about that. The Ghost Dance, Tecumseh's Confederacy, the Pueblo Revolt. These weren't just isolated incidents. Because we read diving into Cold War experiments that sound like they were ripped straight from a sci-fi novel. They were part of a centuries-long struggle against colonization that makes the American Revolution look like a bar fight. Turns out, many tribes were master farmers and city builders. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, for example, had a sophisticated democratic system that some scholars argue influenced the U.S. Constitution. It was a top-secret CIA mind control program that ran from the 1950s to the 70s. Recent economic studies suggest that American colonists actually paid way less in taxes than their British counterparts. The real issue, the myth of rugged individualism. History isn't written in stone, it's written by people. And sometimes those people had, let's call them creative interpretations of the facts. You know, that whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing? Well, turns out early American settlers were way more into communal living and mutual aid than we've been led to believe. Many colonies had laws requiring neighbors to help each other build barns and plant crops. It's like finding out the self-made millionaire you admire actually got a small loan of $1 million from daddy. Rich colonial elites were mad they didn't have more say in how those taxes were spent. It's like complaining about your parents' rules when you're living rent-free in their basement. Ever wonder why the U.S. government was so obsessed with UFOs in the 50s and 60s? Because if there's one thing we've learned today, it's that history is a lot messier and a lot more interesting than we thought. And for the love of all that's holy, don't trust anyone who says they know exactly what happened. Peace out, history nerds. Where turns out it wasn't just about little green men. Declassified documents suggest that some of those flying saucer sightings were actually cover stories for experimental aircraft and spy planes. Reinterpreting old sources and challenging long-held assumptions every day. The history you learned in school, it's probably already outdated. It's like finding out your crazy uncle who believes in aliens was actually onto something. Kind of. We're talking LSD experiments, hypnosis, and psychological manipulation that would make the Stranger Things kids run screaming. It's like finding out your favorite original recipe was actually plagiarized from your grandma's cookbook. Forget Scarlett O'Hara. We re-talking about badass ladies who disguise themselves as men to fight on the front lines. One estimate suggests up to 1,000 women may have secretly served. That's right, Mulan was basically a Civil War documentary. The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. These stories are as American as apple pie, and about as historically accurate. Ow. Turns out, most of them weren't even built right after the war. Nope, they popped up decades later, during the Jim Crow era and the Civil Rights Movement. Turns out they had plenty of religious freedom in Holland. What they really wanted was to set up their own theocracy, where they could be the ones doing the persecuting. It's like finding out your favorite underdog sports movie was actually about the rich kids team. It's like if we started putting up statues of the Kardashians 50 years from now and claimed they represented 2020's culture. And while you're at it, what other historical facts do you think deserve a second look? Never heard of it? Don't worry. Neither had most historians until recently. This massive pre-Columbian city in what's now Illinois had a population larger than London in 1250 AD. We're talking advanced agriculture, complex social structures, and monumental architecture that would make the Mayans jealous. Remember, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So what else do you think they left out? Let's keep this conversation going, because we're diving deep into the murky waters of America's past. And let me tell you, it's about to get weird. Textbooks paint it as a stroke of diplomatic genius, right? Wrong. New evidence suggests Jefferson was in cahoots with a shadowy cabal of wealthy landowners who stood to make millions off westward expansion. It's like finding out your grandpa's wholesome general store was actually a front for the mob. Well, it turns out it was less about divine will and more about cold, hard cash. Recent studies have uncovered a web of land speculation schemes that would make Wall Street blush. Till next time, keep questioning everything, especially the stuff that seems too neat and tidy to be true. You know that one history class where everything felt? It's 2 syllables that should send a chill down your spine. The CIA's mind control program wasn't just real. It was wilder than your conspiracy theorist uncle could have imagined. Buckle up, history buffs and conspiracy theorists alike. First up, hidden agendas behind U.S. expansion. Recent studies have uncovered a web of economic interests driving westward expansion. It wasn't just pioneers and covered wagons. It was railroad tycoons. Picture this. It's 1803, and Thomas Jefferson's just scored the Louisiana Purchase. But wait, there's more. The actual complexity of the Civil War was about slavery, while slavery was the central issue. Oh, and remember how Lincoln freed all the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation? But hold on to your hats, because we're about to get into some real hidden history. What textbooks left out about indigenous resistance? Pop quiz? Name 3 Native American resistance leaders who weren't Sitting Bull or Geronimo? Drawing a blank now? Let's get weird. Secret Cold War experiments that sound like sci-fi MK Ultra? I know. Let us bring it all home with a look at the stories we tell ourselves about our nation's birth. The founding mythologies we all just kind of accepted: George Washington and the cherry tree. Let's start with Washington. As for Paul Revere, his famous ride was more of a group project. Remember, questioning the narrative isn't just for conspiracy theorists anymore. Now hit that like button if school failed you. Drop a comment telling me which fact messed with your brain the most. And hey, while you're down there, why not suggest some other topics that schools never taught us? Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. You know that one history class where everything felt sanitized? Yeah, this isn't that. Welcome to New Discoveries. Buckle up, history buffs and conspiracy theorists alike. First up, hidden agendas behind U.S. expansion. Remember Manifest Destiny? That whole God wants us to take over the continent thing? Picture this. It's 1803 and Thomas Jefferson's just scored the Louisiana Purchase. But wait, it gets better. Remember Lewis and Clark, those intrepid explorers? Mind blown yet? Next up, the Civil War. It's complicated, y'all. Now, I know what you're thinking. For starters, let's talk about those Confederate monuments everyone's been arguing about. And speaking of unexpected twists, let's talk about the role of women in the war. But wait, there's more. Textbooks love to paint Native Americans as passive victims of Manifest Destiny, but oh boy, were they wrong. For starters, let's talk about Cahokia. But it gets better. And let's not forget the resistance movements. Hold on to your tinfoil hats, folks. Ever heard of Project MKULTRA? No, it's not a new energy drink. But it gets weirder. But we're not done yet, folks. It's time to talk about those founding mythologies. We all just kind of ... accepted. You know how we were taught that. The Pilgrims came to America seeking religious freedom. Yeah, about that. And let's talk about that whole taxation without representation thing. My personal favorite. So, what have we learned? But here's the real kicker. We're still uncovering new evidence. So next time someone tries to shut down a debate with that S, just how it has always been, hit M with some of these facts. Until next time, keep questioning, keep digging.